My name is Peyton Dixon. I'm 32. Last Tuesday, my dad called me to his shop and said he took my $158,000 savings, or I was no longer his daughter. He said it was my sister's Italian wedding, that I must accept it since family wealth is shared. I looked at my mom, then at my sister who just laughed, and I said, "You stole it." I drove away in the cold rain that night, and when I checked the bank app, what I found wasn't just a zero balance, it was a federal money laundering trap built by the people who raised me. 6 days later, my entire family showed up at an estate to beg. I stepped onto the balcony and flipped the script. Before I take you back to that Tuesday night, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Drop your city and local time in the comments. I want to know where you're listening from. Now let me take you back to a few weeks ago. Usually the drive takes 3 hours, but the storm had turned the highway into a parking lot. I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel, my heart pounding against my ribs. Just an hour ago, I had received a text from my father, Gareth. It was one word: urgent. My father never uses that word. He is a man made of stone and stubbornness, running his high-end floral design business, Dixon Blooms, for 30 years. He saves his panic for rotting orchids, not family matters. Growing up, the rules in our house were loud and clear. I was the workhorse. Brielle, my younger sister, was the princess. I spent my teenage years sweeping up dead leaves and hauling heavy buckets of water. Brielle spent hers getting manicures and taking dance lessons. I paid my own way through college to become a lead architectural drafter. I lived in a tiny apartment, skipped vacations, and packed my lunch every single day for 8 years. I had saved exactly $158,000. It was sitting in a high-yield legacy savings account, waiting to buy a small piece of land where I could build my own cabin. Brielle, on the other hand, had her entire life funded by our parents. Now at 24, she was planning a massive, over-the-top destination wedding. While I was stuck in traffic at mile marker 42, my phone buzzed with an automated bank alert: large withdrawal processed. I swiped it away. I assumed it was just a system glitch. My bank had been updating their app all week. I had bigger things to worry about, like why my parents had demanded I come to the floral shop at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I finally parked in the alley behind the shop. The heavy scent of dying roses and sharp eucalyptus hit me as soon as I opened the back door. The main workroom was blindingly bright. Rows of bright yellow sunflowers were shoved into the corners, waiting for a weekend gala. My parents were standing by the main metal work table. Brielle was sitting on a stool next to them. She was wearing a brand new, custom-tailored turquoise blue silk suit, lazily scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "You're late," my father snapped. He didn't say hello. He didn't offer a hug. "There was a storm, Dad," I said, shaking the water from my raincoat. "What's the emergency?" My mother, Deanna, stepped forward. She handed me a thick neon green piece of paper. It was a printed schedule for Brielle's wedding week in Italy. "What is this?" I asked, confused. "We had to finalize the venue and the caterers today," my father said. He planted his hands flat on the metal table. His voice was freezing cold. "We gave your entire savings to your sister's wedding. She needs it more." The room suddenly felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of it. My ears started to ring. "What did you just say?" "The wedding was going way over budget," my mother said, crossing her arms tightly across her chest. "Your father and I didn't have enough liquid cash, but your name is still attached to that old joint account from when you were a teenager. So, we transferred it." "That was $158,000. I screamed, my voice cracking. The polite, quiet daughter I had always been vanished in a single second. "That was everything I worked for. You stole it." "Stop being selfish," my mother hissed, her eyes narrowing. "Your sister is starting a new life. You're just hoarding money for a piece of dirt in the woods. Go take out a loan if you need cash so badly. If you dare sue us, you are dead to this family." I looked at Brielle, expecting her to look guilty, to cry, to apologize. Instead, she adjusted a thick diamond bracelet on her wrist and let out a soft, mocking laugh. "Honestly, Peyton, you don't even have a boyfriend. What do you need all that money for anyway?" My hands shook violently as I pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. The screen loaded. Available balance, $0. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. The betrayal was so deep, so absolute, it felt like a knife twisting directly into my spine. They hadn't asked me to help. They had completely gutted my life to buy my sister a party. I turned around and walked out into the pouring rain. I drove 3 blocks and pulled over at a glowing ATM. I stood in the freezing rain and shoved my debit card into the machine. The screen glowed neon green in the dark. I checked my balance again, hoping the app was wrong. It wasn't. The cold metal of the machine pressed against my wet forehead as the reality crushed me. I was broke. The people who raised me had robbed me blind. I sat in my cold car, shivering and broken. But then my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was Great Aunt Martha. Martha was my grandmother's younger sister. When my grandmother died 2 years ago, after a horrible battle with cancer, Martha was the only one who truly held me while I cried. My parents had been too busy worrying about the inheritance. Martha understood my soul. She was my safe harbor. I answered the phone, and for the first time that night I burst into heavy, gasping sobs. "Aunt Martha?" I whispered, the freezing rain drumming violently against my windshield. The heater in my old sedan was broken, and I was shivering so hard my teeth clicked together. "Peyton, sweet girl, why are you crying?" Martha's voice was raspy but strong. She was 78, lived in a massive stone estate 2 hours north, and had never been afraid of anyone. When my grandmother, her sister, passed away in agonizing pain 2 years ago, Martha was the only one who sat on the floor with me. She stroked my hair while my parents were busy arguing in the hallway about who would inherit the antique furniture. I choked on my words, struggling to breathe. They took it, Mom and Dad. They emptied my legacy account, $158,000. They gave it all to Brielle for her destination wedding in Italy. The line went dead silent. For 10 long, agonizing seconds, I only heard the faint crackle of the phone. I thought the storm had dropped the call. "Pack your bags," Martha finally said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, low whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "Come to my estate tonight." "I can't," I sobbed, gripping the steering wheel. I was too broken, too exhausted to drive another 2 hours in the dark. "I need to figure out what to do. I have $0 to my name. Don't do anything yet. I just saw exactly what they did, and I promise you, Peyton, they are going to regret it," Martha vowed. "Your grandmother warned me about Gareth's ruthless greed before she passed. She knew he would sacrifice you for Brielle. Call me tomorrow morning. Be safe." I didn't go home to my empty, cold apartment. Instead, I drove straight to my best friend Nova's place. Nova is a brilliant software developer. When I walked into her loft, she was sitting in the dark, surrounded by monitors glowing with a bright yellow interface. She was building a complex video utility platform, a dashboard designed to automatically shuffle and merge silent video clips into specific durations for social media creators. It was highly technical, but she loved the automation of it. But the moment she saw my pale, tear-stained face, she instantly pushed her keyboard away. The bright yellow light from her screens cast long shadows across her face. "What happened?" she asked, rushing over and grabbing a blanket to wrap around my shaking shoulders. I told her everything. How my parents had used my old teenage joint account access to completely bypass the bank's security, how my life savings were gone, how they looked at me with cold, dead eyes and told me to take out a loan. Nova didn't waste time giving me useless pity. "She's a fixer. You need a legal shark. Tonight," she said. She pulled up a contact on her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "Randall Kent. He specializes in high-stakes asset recovery and financial betrayal. He's expensive, but he absolutely destroys people who steal." While Nova drafted a highly secure email to Randall on my behalf, I sat on her couch and numbly opened my laptop. I logged into my side project, a YouTube channel called Final Cosmic. It was a passion project where I told intense, outcome-driven stories about cosmic justice and karma. I had a few $100s of ad revenue sitting in the dashboard. I stared at the tiny number. It was literally all the money I had left in the world. My chest felt impossibly tight. My 9 years of drafting blueprints, saving every penny, and sacrificing my youth were entirely erased. Randall replied to Nova's email at 1:15 a.m. His message was just 4 sentences, but they were chilling. "Miss Dixon, I have reviewed the basic facts. This is a clear case of familial financial abuse and bank manipulation. Do not warn them. We need to trace the wire transfers immediately before the funds are sent overseas to wedding vendors. Do not warn them." The sentence sat on the screen like a heavy brick. These were the people who had taught me how to read, the people I shared Thanksgiving dinners with. But they were also the people who stole my future to buy Brielle a custom turquoise blue suit and a luxury Italian vacation. I had spent my life building a safety net, only for them to cut the ropes. At 8 a.m. the next morning, my phone vibrated loudly against Nova's glass coffee table. It was a voice note from my father. I played it, my hands shaking with dread. Peyton, Gareth's voice was smooth and commanding, completely ignoring the fact that he had ruined my life 12 hours ago. Brielle wants a massive neon green and white floral arch for the ceremony. I expect you to draft the structural designs by Friday. Family takes care of family. Don't be bitter and ruin her timeline. Just scramble your own plans and mutate your schedule for us. He wasn't calling to apologize. He wasn't feeling guilty. He was demanding I work for free for the very event he had stolen my money to fund. He didn't sound like a father who had made a desperate mistake. He sounded like a thief who fully believed he had gotten away with it. And he had no idea what Aunt Martha and I were about to do. Nova's apartment lobby was freezing, a sharp contrast to the warm, bright yellow interface glowing on her computer screens upstairs. I was pacing across the slick marble floor, waiting for my ride to Randall's office, when the automatic glass doors slid open. A blast of cold, damp air rushed in, carrying the heavy, suffocating scent of gardenias and expensive perfume. My mother, Deanna, stood there dripping wet. She wasn't crying. She didn't call me on the phone to mention my father's high blood pressure or try to guilt-trip me about his failing health like she usually would. Instead, she walked right up to me, her expensive heels clicking loudly on the stone, and forced a massive, completely fake smile onto her face. "Peyton, sweetheart," she cooed, her body language stiff and completely unnatural. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a thick, heavy envelope. She shoved it aggressively against my chest. "I brought you your formal invitation. We saved you a front-row seat by the altar." I looked down, my hands trembling as I took it. It was a custom, heavy-stock turquoise blue wedding invitation stamped with shiny gold foil. The absolute audacity of it made my stomach violently churn. They had stolen my entire life savings, erased 9 years of my blood, sweat, and tears, and now she was treating me like a VIP guest to my own financial funeral. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" I asked, my voice shaking with a breathless emotional drive. The anger bubbling inside me was entirely new. "Did you think I'd just smile and watch Brielle spend my cabin money on a party?" Deanna's fake smile vanished instantly. Her eyes went flat and reptilian. "You are completely overreacting. We didn't steal anything. We reallocated family assets. Family wealth is meant to be shared, Peyton. If you go to the police and cause a scene, you'll ruin Brielle's big day, and I will never ever forgive you." She turned on her heel and marched back out into the violent storm. It was a confession, dressed up as a bizarre, twisted family policy. She felt zero remorse. As I watched her taillights fade into the rain, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It wasn't a long fake apology text from Brielle claiming she didn't know where the money came from. Instead, it was a rapid-fire, high-tension demand that made my blood run cold. "Peyton, the $158K barely covered the coastal venue and the luxury catering. I need you to put the bright yellow custom dance floor on your credit card today. Don't be cheap, it's my big day. Mutate your budget if you have to." I stared at the glowing screen. She knew. She knew exactly whose money she was spending, and she was actually annoyed it wasn't more. My sister wasn't a victim of my parents' scheme. She was a willing participant. I didn't reply. I blocked her number immediately, feeling a strange, hollow snap in my chest where my love for her used to be. An hour later, I was sitting in Randall Kent's sleek downtown office. It smelled like expensive leather, floor wax, and fresh espresso. Randall laid out a massive printed spreadsheet on his glass desk, his demeanor calm but sharp. "We tracked the wire transfers," he said, his voice deadly serious. "Your father didn't just send the money straight to the Italian vendors. That would be too easy for a bank fraud department to freeze and reverse." Randall pointed a silver pen to a highlighted row of numbers. "Gareth wired your $158,000 to a shell company he quietly registered last month called Dixon Global Supplies. He categorized your money as a massive business expense for buying imported orchids. Then he immediately transferred the clean money from that fake business account directly to Brielle's luxury wedding planner in Rome." My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. "That's not just a simple bank theft," I whispered, the reality of the situation crashing over me like a heavy wave. "That's textbook money laundering." "Exactly," Randall nodded, leaning back in his tall chair. "It's a federal financial crime. If we file this with the FBI and the IRS, your father's floral business will be seized pending investigation. Your parents will face actual prison time. Or, option 2, you do nothing. You absorb the betrayal and you start your life over from zero." I looked down at the neatly organized documents. I thought about my 9 years of skipping lunches, driving a busted car and drafting architectural blueprints until my eyes burned. I thought about the heavy turquoise blue invitation currently sitting like a stone in my damp coat pocket. I want a plan, I told Randall, my heart hammering a chaotic, intense rhythm against my ribs. I want to completely scramble their timeline. We are going to execute a 7-step mutation strategy. We freeze their business accounts, reverse the wire through the International Fraud Department, and dismantle their shell company piece by piece. But first, I want to give them one final chance to surrender the funds voluntarily. Randall raised a skeptical eyebrow. He folded his hands on the desk. How long do you want to give them? 8 days, I said, my voice finally steady. 8 days felt like a mercy. It also felt like enough rope for them to hang themselves. Right now, I need you to do something. If you've ever had someone you love look you dead in the eye and lie to your face, hit that like button. And if you want to see what happens when the clock runs out on my parents, subscribe to Final Cosmic. Because the universe always balances the scales, justice is coming, and the fallout is going to be breathless. I sat on the cold, hard floor of my living room, the bright yellow glow of my laptop screen burning my tired, swollen eyes. It was 3 a.m. on Wednesday. If my parents had stolen my $158,000 through a digital wire transfer, they needed my banking passwords. I am a lead architectural drafter. My entire life is organized in secure, encrypted folders. I don't share my passwords with anyone. So how did they do it? Halfway through my digital archives, I found it. It felt like a physical punch to my throat. It was an email from my mother, Deanna, dated 4 years ago. Peyton, sweetheart, your father and I are updating our emergency life insurance files. We need the routing and login details for your legacy account, just in case you ever get into a terrible accident and we need to pay your hospital bills. I had given it to her. I had trusted her because she was my mother. She hadn't just stolen from me in a moment of panic. She had laid the trap 4 years ago. She had been holding onto the key to my life savings, just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My chest felt so tight I could barely breathe. To make it worse, Nova sent me a link to Brielle's public wedding website. I clicked it. The screen exploded in neon green and turquoise blue floral graphics. Right there on the homepage, in massive bold letters, was a message from my sister. A massive thank you to Mom and Dad for fully sponsoring our $158,000 dream Italian wedding. We are so blessed. She didn't just spend my money. She bragged about the exact dollar amount to the entire world, giving my parents all the credit for my 9 years of suffering and saving. My phone vibrated on the floor. It was Great Aunt Martha. Even at 3:30 a.m. she was wide awake. Peyton, she said, her raspy voice vibrating with pure focused anger. I spoke to my lawyers tonight. Did you know Gareth actually went bankrupt 15 years ago? What? I gasped, completely shocked. No, Dixon Blooms is supposed to be highly successful. It's a fake front, Martha scoffed, her tone dripping with disgust. He lost everything. To save him from living on the street, I bought the deed to their massive house in Milford. I let them live there rent-free so you and Brielle wouldn't suffer. I am the actual owner of the property. And since they decided to steal your future, I am taking theirs. My heart started to hammer a wild, frantic rhythm against my ribs. What are you going to do? I am activating the trap, Martha said firmly. You gave them an 8-day ultimatum to return the cash. Well, I am drafting an official legally binding eviction notice. I will give them exactly 6 days to pack up their stolen designer clothes and get out of my house. The power in her words sent a jolt of electricity down my spine. The timeline was completely scrambled now. They were going to be hit from both sides. By 10 a.m. on Thursday, I was sitting at my drafting desk at the architecture firm, trying to focus on a new blueprint. The office was quiet, filled with the soft hum of computers. Suddenly, the heavy glass doors of the lobby violently slammed open. Aunt Corinne, Gareth's older sister, came marching through the bullpen. She was wearing a cheap lavender sweater, and she smelled strongly of stale cigarettes and strong mints. Her face was bright red with fury. She didn't wait to get to my desk. She started screaming right in the middle of the office. How dare you send a lawyer's demand letter to your father's shop? Are you out of your mind, Peyton? My coworkers stopped typing. Heads popped up from cubicles. I stood up, my face burning with embarrassment, but my hands were completely steady. Aunt Corinne, this is my workplace. You need to leave. I'm not leaving until you drop this ridiculous lawsuit, she yelled, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. Your father told the whole family everything. He said Brielle's business was failing and you refused to help her, so he just borrowed some family funds. You are threatening to put your own mother in federal prison over a stupid misunderstanding." There it was, Gareth's twisted, mutated version of the story. He had stripped away all the facts. He didn't tell her about the wire fraud. He didn't tell her it was $158,000. He didn't mention the turquoise blue suit or the Italian destination wedding. He painted himself as a desperate hero and me as a selfish, heartless monster. I looked at Aunt Corinne. Her body language was aggressive, her jaw tight. She had totally bought his lies. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Aunt Corinne," I said, my voice dangerously quiet but echoing in the silent office. "It was $158,000. It was my entire life savings, and it wasn't for a failing business. It was for a luxury wedding in Italy." Corinne froze. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The number hit her like a physical blow. She blinked, looking around at my silent coworkers, suddenly realizing she might not have the full story. "Don't ever come to my office again," I said, pointing toward the elevators. "Go ask Gareth about the shell company he created to hide my money. See what he says." Corinne backed away slowly, her face draining of color, and practically ran to the elevator. Gareth's wall of lies was starting to crack, and the real explosion hadn't even happened yet. The heavy weekend rain finally stopped by Saturday morning, leaving the streets of Concord smelling like wet asphalt and crushed pine needles. I was sitting at my kitchen island, nervously gripping a hot mug of black tea, when a heavy rhythmic knock echoed from my front door. I looked through the peephole. It wasn't my angry parents or my crying sister. It was Uncle Ray. Uncle Ray was my mother's brother, a quiet, broad-shouldered man who worked as a commercial structural inspector. He never got involved in family drama. When I opened the door, his face was pale, and his posture was slumped, like he was carrying an invisible boulder on his back. He didn't say hello. He just walked inside, pulled a thick, crumbling manila folder from his leather jacket, and dropped it onto my granite counter. It landed with a heavy, dusty thud. "I started digging after Corinne called me screaming about your lawyer," Ray said, his voice completely exhausted. He rubbed his tired eyes. "Gareth isn't just stealing from you, Peyton. He's been draining all of us." I opened the folder. My hands trembled as I sifted through years of hidden financial records. Ray had found proof that Gareth had secretly taken out a massive $50,000 loan in Ray's name 3 years ago, using the floral business as fake collateral. Gareth was a financial parasite, feeding on the entire family to keep up his wealthy illusion. "He's been bankrupt for over a decade," Ray whispered, clenching his large fists. "I am so sorry I didn't see it sooner. You are doing the right thing. Burn his fake empire to the ground." As Ray left, leaving the heavy evidence behind, my laptop chimed with a sharp, piercing notification. Nova had sent me a link to Brielle's public social media account. "You need to see this right now," Nova's text read. I clicked the link. The screen flashed to a video of Brielle sitting in a luxury Italian-style cafe. She was wearing a massive, ridiculous neon green sun hat that cast shadows over her fake, tear-filled eyes. The background of the video was filtered in a heavily saturated turquoise blue. "Hey guys," Brielle sniffled to the camera, wiping away an imaginary tear with a manicured finger. "I'm just so heartbroken today. My totally jealous older sister is trying to legally ruin my dream wedding because she's bitter and single. She's literally trying to steal my parents' hard-earned money to stop my happiness. Please send positive vibes." The video already had 10,000 views. Strangers in the comments were calling me a monster. My sister was literally using my stolen $158,000 to buy luxury coffee while simultaneously playing the victim on the internet to destroy my reputation. My blood boiled, turning from hot anger to pure freezing ice. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. A new, breathless emotional drive locked into my chest. I took a screenshot of the video and forwarded it to Randall. 10 minutes later, Randall called me. His voice was sharper than a surgical blade. "Miss Dixon, we have a new development," Randall announced over the phone. 10 minutes ago, your mother, Deanna, attempted to quietly wire $10,000 directly into your checking account from an untraceable offshore account. She attached a digital note that read, "Please take this and drop the lawyer. We can fix this." I gasped, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. Where did she even get $10,000? "It doesn't matter," Randall said fiercely. "I have officially intercepted and blocked the transfer. In the eyes of the law, secretly sending a victim money to drop a federal case is classified as witness tampering and bribery. Your mother just committed another felony. She just handed us the final nail for her own coffin. My mother wasn't sorry. She was just trying to buy her way out of federal prison using spare change. Before I could even process Deanna's twisted bribe, my cell phone beeped with an incoming FaceTime call from Great Aunt Martha. I answered it, and the screen filled with the rainy exterior of Dixon Blooms, my father's supposed high-end floral shop. Martha was sitting in the back of her sleek black town car, pointing her camera at the front doors of the shop. "Watch this, Peyton," she said, her raspy voice vibrating with fierce triumph. Two men in dark legal suits were standing in front of my father's glass storefront. Gareth was standing on the sidewalk, his face purple with absolute rage, waving his arms wildly. One of the men pulled out a heavy steel chain and wrapped it tightly around the door handles. Then he snapped a massive, blindingly bright yellow padlock right onto the chain, locking it shut. "Since I own the deed to their house, my lawyers did some digging," Martha explained, a wicked, satisfying smile spreading across her wrinkled face. "It turns out Gareth hasn't paid the commercial rent on this shop in 8 months. The landlord was preparing to evict him anyway. I just paid the landlord in cash to expedite the process. Dixon Blooms is officially seized. He cannot get inside. He cannot sell a single flower." I watched through the screen as my father furiously kicked the glass door, realizing his fake empire was completely dead. The trap hadn't just been activated, it had snapped shut directly on their necks. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The storm that had paused Saturday morning returned with a vengeance by Sunday evening. I wasn't in my small, cold apartment anymore. I was standing inside Great Aunt Martha's massive stone estate, surrounded by tall windows that overlooked the iron front gates. The mansion smelled like old wood, burning cedar, and absolute safety. I felt like a general standing in a fortress. My phone hadn't rung all day. Randall had spent the weekend finalizing the legal strike. He didn't just file an identity theft report. He had officially frozen the $158,000 wire transfer at the international level and submitted a formal money laundering complaint to the federal authorities. The FBI now had full access to the Dixon Global Supplies shell company. At exactly 6 p.m., a convoy of headlights cut through the dark, slashing rain. I watched from the second-story balcony as my father's truck, my mother's sedan, and Aunt Corinne's SUV skidded to a halt in the muddy circular driveway. They had received Martha's 6-day eviction notice, and Gareth had just found the bright yellow padlock on his floral shop. They were panicking. They came to beg Martha for mercy, completely unaware that I was standing right inside. Gareth leaped out of his truck, ignoring the freezing rain. He stomped up the marble front steps, his face twisted in desperate rage, and began pounding his heavy fists against Martha's giant oak doors. Deanna ran up behind him, crying hysterically, while Brielle huddled under a turquoise blue umbrella, trying to protect her expensive hair. "Aunt Martha, open the door," Gareth bellowed, his voice cracking like thunder. "You can't do this. You can't kick us out of our home. I have a business to run." Martha, standing right next to me in the dark hallway, simply pressed a small silver button on the wall. The heavy outdoor floodlights snapped on, bathing the front steps in blinding, harsh white light. The heavy oak doors remained firmly shut. Instead, Martha unlocked the glass balcony doors. I took a deep breath, letting the freezing wind hit my face, and stepped outside. I stood on the high stone balcony, looking directly down at them. Martha stood firmly on my right side. Randall stepped out onto my left, holding a sleek digital tablet. Gareth stopped pounding on the door. He froze. His jaw dropped open as the rain plastered his gray hair to his forehead. Deanna let out a high-pitched gasp, covering her mouth with both hands. Brielle dropped her umbrella into a muddy puddle. They stared up at me, completely paralyzed. The power dynamic had instantly flipped. I was no longer the quiet architectural drafter they could push around. I was the judge. "Peyton," Gareth choked out, his voice suddenly small. "What are you doing up there?" "I told you I was going to scramble your plans, Dad," I said. My voice didn't shake. It echoed through the cold night air with a breathless emotional drive. "You took my future, so Aunt Martha is taking yours." Aunt Corinne rolled down her SUV window, her eyes wide with shock. "Peyton, tell her to stop this. This is family business." It stopped being family business the minute he stole my life savings and laundered it through a fake shell company. I called down to her. I nodded at Randall. "Show them." Randall didn't hand out paper documents. He tapped a button on his tablet and the massive outdoor security projector, usually used for Martha's summer movie nights, flashed to life. It beamed a giant, glowing spreadsheet right onto the side of the white stone garage for everyone in the driveway to see. "This is the bank wire," Randall announced loudly over the storm, his voice carrying the weight of a federal prosecutor. Gareth and Deanna Dixon illegally bypassed banking security to drain $158,000 from Peyton's legacy account. They funneled it through a fake business called Dixon Global Supplies to pay for Brielle's wedding. The image on the wall shifted. It displayed the digital note from my mother. This morning, Deanna attempted to secretly wire $10,000 to Peyton as a bribe to drop the charges. That is federal witness tampering. It is punishable by up to 20 years in prison. The image shifted one final time, flashing a bright yellow warning banner. It was the loan document Uncle Ray had found, and 3 years ago, Gareth secretly took out a $50,000 business loan using Ray's identity. Gareth is entirely bankrupt. He is a financial predator. Aunt Corinne stepped out of her SUV into the pouring rain. She stared at the giant projected screen, her face draining of all color. She slowly turned to look at Gareth, her eyes filling with pure disgust. "You stole from Ray?" she whispered. "You told me Peyton was the selfish one. You've been robbing us blind." Gareth took a step back, raising his hands in a pathetic surrender. "Corinne, listen to me. I was just trying to keep the family image alive." But before Gareth could finish his lie, Brielle completely lost her mind. She let out a blood-curdling scream and threw her expensive designer purse straight into the mud. She stomped her custom neon green heels into the dirt, ruining them instantly. "My wedding is ruined," Brielle shrieked, tears and rain mixing on her ruined makeup. "The Italian vendors saw the backlash from my video today. People are leaving terrible comments, and the catering company just canceled my contract because they don't want to be associated with stolen money. You ruined my life, Peyton." I leaned over the cold stone railing, looking down at my crying, pathetic sister. "I didn't ruin your life, Brielle," I said with absolute, freezing clarity. "You ruined it yourself when you decided my 9 years of hard work were yours to spend." Great Aunt Martha finally spoke. Her voice was like grinding stones. "You have 6 days to get your things out of my house, Gareth. If you take so much as a single doorknob, I will have you arrested for theft before the FBI even gets here. Get off my property." Nobody argued. Nobody tried to fight back. Aunt Corinne got back into her SUV and slammed the door, speeding away without them. Gareth stood in the rain, watching his entire fake empire burn to ash in the span of 5 minutes. The trap had closed. The red taillights of Gareth's truck slowly faded into the stormy darkness, glowing faintly like dying embers in the rain. He didn't slam his door. He didn't scream anymore. The fight had been completely drained out of him. Deanna's sedan followed slowly, her tires slipping on the muddy path. Brielle was left to ride with them in the back seat, her expensive turquoise blue outfit soaked and ruined. The circular driveway was empty, save for the deep muddy tire tracks that looked like ugly physical scars torn into the earth. Aunt Martha placed a warm, wrinkled hand on my trembling shoulder. "Breathe, Peyton. The poison is finally out," she whispered softly. And she was right. My chest, which had been locked in a tight, breathless panic for nearly a week, suddenly felt lighter. The legal machine didn't move with dramatic movie explosions. It moved with a silent, crushing efficiency. The very next morning, I went straight to Nova's loft. We sat in front of her glowing bright yellow computer monitors. Nova had coded a custom tracking script synced with Randall's legal updates so we could watch the financial recovery in real time. We stared, absolutely mesmerized, as the International Banking Fraud Division forcibly reversed the wire transfer. The luxury Italian wedding planners, terrified of being federally indicted as accomplices to international money laundering, surrendered the funds immediately. The stolen $158,000 began its slow, systematic journey back into my legacy account. Watching the numbers tick back up felt like watching my own heartbeat return to a hospital monitor. Meanwhile, Brielle's desperate social media stunt spectacularly backfired. Nova pulled up Brielle's profile. Her fake crying video wearing that neon green hat had reached the absolute wrong audience. Internet sleuths recognized the turquoise blue background and traced it to her lavish wedding announcements. Within 48 hours, her main brand sponsor, a high-end organic cosmetics line, publicly dropped her. She was officially fired from her only source of income as a brand ambassador. Her follower count plummeted by the thousands as thousands of comments flooded in, calling out her toxic, spoiled behavior. Her digital empire crumbled just as fast as my father's physical one. By Wednesday, the federal financial freeze had completely choked my parents out. Randall called me during my lunch break with a grim, pathetic update. A local pawn shop owner in Milford had contacted the authorities. Deanna had walked into the dusty shop, trembling, trying to sell her heavy diamond wedding ring and a velvet bag of designer watches for quick cash. Because her name and assets were actively frozen under a federal witness tampering and fraud investigation, the pawnshop owner legally had to decline the sale and report the attempt. My mother, who had always paraded around in luxury, was now completely broke, reduced to begging for spare change in a dingy pawnshop. But the ultimate, devastating blow landed on Thursday afternoon. Aunt Martha's neighbor, who lived right down the street from my parents' soon-to-be evicted house, sent Martha a grainy cell phone video. Martha forwarded it to me. I pressed play. The video showed 3 dark, heavy government SUVs parked directly on my parents' manicured front lawn. Agents wearing dark windbreakers with IRS criminal investigation printed in bright yellow letters were carrying heavy cardboard boxes of financial records out of the front door. Gareth stood on the porch, his face pale, hollow, and totally defeated. He watched silently as the federal government dismantled his fake, fraudulent life, box by heavy box. I sat at my drafting desk at the architecture firm, tracing a perfectly straight line on a new architectural blueprint. I was a master of structure and stability, but I had never realized how deeply rotten the foundation of my own family truly was. They had built their wealthy, glamorous illusion entirely on my back. Now their walls were collapsing into dust, and for the first time in my life, I was standing safely outside the blast zone. It had been exactly 6 days since Aunt Martha dropped the eviction hammer. Instead of sitting in a stuffy office staring at financial spreadsheets, I was standing in the middle of a dense, quiet forest 2 hours east of the city. The crisp autumn air smelled like sweet pine and damp earth. The trees above me were a brilliant, blinding neon green and bright yellow, their leaves crunching softly under my heavy boots. This was the 5-acre plot of land I had been dreaming of buying for 9 years. In the original version of my life, the one before my family robbed me, I would have been nervously checking my savings account to see if I had enough to make an offer. Today, I simply opened my secure banking app. The screen glowed warmly. The International Fraud Division had successfully completed the reversal. My exact balance was $158,000. My money was entirely back, safely locked behind a new, impenetrable firewall that nobody in my family knew existed. The healing process had begun, quiet and steady, like a deep cut finally closing over. But back in Milford, my parents' world was violently exploding. Randall called me while I was walking back to my car. His voice had lost its usual calm, replaced by a sharp edge of sheer disbelief. The IRS Criminal Investigation Unit just cracked the Dixon Global Supplies shell company, he told me, the wind whipping through the phone speaker. Peyton, your father didn't use all of your $158,000 for Brielle's Italian wedding. I stopped dead in my tracks. What do you mean? Brielle bragged about the exact amount. Gareth lied to her too, Randall said, laying out the devastating truth. The wedding venue only cost $118,000. Your father skimmed the remaining $40,000 to quietly pay off a massive, dangerous underground gambling debt he owed to a local bookie. He used his own daughter's wedding as a smokescreen to save his own kneecaps. My stomach dropped. Gareth wasn't just a financial predator who wanted to look wealthy. He was a desperate gambler who used his family as human shields. He had thrown me under the bus, and then he had used Brielle's vanity to hide his darkest secrets. Even Deanna had no idea. The fallout from that revelation didn't stay hidden for long. By Tuesday afternoon, Brielle's perfect, fake world completely shattered. Her wealthy fiancé, a naive investment banker named Carter, found out about the federal investigation. He realized that the extravagant turquoise-blue wedding invitations he had mailed to his elite friends were paid for with stolen money and illegal money laundering. He was absolutely horrified. Nova texted me a screenshot of Carter's public social media post. It was brutal and swift. Due to severe ethical and legal discoveries regarding my fiancé's family, I am officially calling off the wedding, Carter wrote. I refuse to be associated with financial abuse. Brielle wasn't just broke and fired from her influencer job. She was now publicly dumped and utterly humiliated. The massive Italian wedding she had traded my soul for was dead. All those custom turquoise blue dresses and neon green floral arrangements were completely useless. Wednesday was eviction day. The 6-day deadline Martha gave them had officially expired at noon. My parents had stubbornly refused to pack their belongings, hoping Martha was bluffing. Gareth, holding on to his desperate ego, believed he could just refuse to leave the massive house. He was incredibly wrong. I sat in Aunt Martha's warm kitchen, drinking a cup of chamomile tea, while we watched the live security camera feed from the Milford property on her tablet. Martha hadn't bothered calling the local police to deal with trespassers. She had hired a high-end private property extraction team. On the screen, a massive bright yellow moving truck backed into the driveway. 4 enormous men in black tactical uniforms marched up to the front porch. They didn't knock politely. They unlocked the door using Martha's master key and walked straight inside. We watched through the living room camera as Gareth tried to block the hallway, his face red with screaming rage. The security lead simply handed Gareth a court-ordered trespassing document and pointed to the door. Their body language was cold, immovable stone. Because my parents hadn't packed a single box, the extraction team legally bagged their items into cheap, clear plastic garbage bags and tossed them onto the wet front lawn. Deanna ran outside, clutching a handful of expensive silk scarves, sobbing hysterically as her luxury life was literally treated like trash. Brielle sat on the curb, her face buried in her knees, shivering in a cheap gray hoodie. They were forced to pile into Deanna's old sedan because Gareth's truck had been repossessed by the bank earlier that morning. They drove away from the beautiful home they had lived in for 20 years, leaving behind a pile of plastic bags in the rain. I watched the screen fade to black as the security team changed the locks. I didn't feel sorry for them. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt an incredibly deep, breathless emotional relief. The parasites had been completely removed. The bitter chill of the rainy week finally broke, giving way to a bright, freezing Tuesday morning. I was sitting inside a sleek, quiet real estate office in downtown Concord. The room smelled like expensive coffee and fresh paper. I held a heavy black pen in my hand. It was the exact same hand my mother had used to forge my trust. But today, I was signing my own name, on my own terms. Next to me sat Uncle Ray and Nova, both beaming with pride. I pressed the pen to the thick, crisp legal deed and signed, Peyton Dixon. I didn't need a massive mortgage or a bank loan. I handed over a certified cashier's check for $158,000. The 5-acre forest plot, the one with the neon green pine trees and the perfect clearing for a cabin, was officially mine. The heavy weight that had been crushing my chest for weeks completely vanished. I had my future back. To celebrate, Nova and I decided to drive out to the land. But on the way, we stopped at a rundown, greasy diner on the edge of the highway to grab some black coffee. The diner's neon green sign was flickering, and the air inside smelled like burnt bacon and stale syrup. We sat at a sticky booth in the back. That's when I saw her. Walking out of the swinging kitchen doors, carrying a heavy plastic tray of dirty dishes, was Deanna, my mother, the woman who used to refuse to leave the house without a flawless blowout and expensive pearls. Now she was wearing a cheap, stained mustard yellow waitress uniform. Her hair was tied back in a messy, greasy bun. Her shoulders were deeply hunched, her body language screaming with total exhaustion and defeat. She dropped a fork. As she bent down to pick it up, she looked up and locked eyes with me. She froze. The heavy tray trembled in her hands. I didn't smile. I didn't glare. I just looked at her with a quiet, breathless, emotional drive. Deanna quickly looked away, her face burning with deep, ugly shame, and practically ran back into the kitchen. I didn't follow her. I simply left a $20 tip on the sticky table and walked out. The glamorous, arrogant mother who told me to take out a loan was gone forever. The universe had balanced the scales. By Wednesday evening, the legal hammer fell on Gareth. Randall called me while I was sketching the foundational blueprints for my new cabin. The sound of Randall's steady, cold voice immediately told me it was serious. "The police found Gareth," Randall said. "He didn't run far. He was hiding in a cheap, moldy motel right outside of Milford. The underground bookies he owed that $40,000 to had finally tracked him down. But the federal agents got there first." Randall explained the chaotic scene. Federal agents had kicked in the cheap wooden door of his motel room. Gareth was dragged out into the freezing parking lot in his dirty pajamas, his hands locked in heavy steel handcuffs. The flashing red and blue police lights reflected off the wet pavement. He was formally charged with federal money laundering, bank fraud, and illegal gambling operations. He begged the officers to let him call his family, but nobody was left to answer the phone. He was locked in a concrete federal holding cell, completely alone, facing decades in prison. The family structure didn't just break, it completely exploded and rearranged itself. On Thursday, my phone rang. It was Aunt Corinne. When I answered, she wasn't yelling. She was sobbing, taking huge, gasping breaths. "Peyton, "I am so sorry," she cried, her voice cracking with pure devastation. You were right about all of it." After Martha had evicted them, Brielle had nowhere to go. She had begged Corinne to let her sleep on her couch. Corinne, still trying to believe in family loyalty, had agreed. But that morning, Corinne had woken up early to find Brielle sneaking out the back door. "She tried to rob me, Peyton," Corinne sobbed. I caught Brielle shoving my vintage turquoise blue jewelry and my grandmother's silver into her duffel bag. She was trying to steal my valuables to buy a plane ticket to run away from her debts. I called the police and kicked her out into the street. She is exactly like Gareth. I closed my eyes, letting the heavy reality wash over me. Brielle hadn't learned a single lesson. Stripped of her stolen money and her fake influencer lifestyle, her true colors had shown. She was a selfish parasite. Corinne finally saw the ugly truth that I had lived with my entire life. The toxic illusion of the perfect Dixon family was officially dead and buried. That weekend, Uncle Ray drove his heavy yellow pickup truck out to my new property. He brought a set of heavy steel shovels and 2 thermoses of hot chocolate. The air was biting cold, but the bright yellow morning sun was shining directly through the trees. "Ready to break ground, kid?" Ray asked, his broad shoulders relaxed and a genuine warm smile on his face. He didn't bring up Gareth's arrest. He didn't mention Brielle's betrayal. We didn't need to. The bad blood was completely drained. "I'm ready," I said. I pushed the sharp metal blade of the shovel deep into the dark, damp earth. The sound of the dirt moving was the best sound I had ever heard. I wasn't sweeping up dead leaves for my father anymore. I wasn't funding a fake turquoise blue wedding. I was building my own walls, on my own land, with my own hands. The legal process would take months to fully wrap up. But in my heart, the war was already over. I had won. 18 months passed. The heavy dark storm that had once destroyed my life was now nothing but a distant memory. I wasn't sitting in a tiny freezing apartment anymore. I was standing in the center of my very own custom-built 2-story A-frame cabin, surrounded by the neon green pine trees of my 5-acre forest. The air inside smelled deeply of fresh-cut cedar, roasting turkey, and sweet cinnamon. I had designed every single inch of this home myself. My career had exploded since the betrayal. Channeling my breathless emotional drive into my work, I had just been promoted to lead project manager at the architecture firm. My new salary was a rock-solid $120,000 a year. I hadn't just recovered my stolen savings. I had built an entire financial fortress that nobody could ever touch. It was Thanksgiving evening. Outside, the first thick snowflakes of winter were drifting down from the dark purple sky. Inside, the massive stone fireplace was crackling with bright yellow flames, casting a warm golden glow across my living room. I didn't have a huge fake family sitting around my table this year. My table was small, but it was honest. Nova was laughing loudly, pouring sparkling apple cider into crystal glasses. Uncle Ray was carving the turkey, his broad shoulders completely relaxed, telling a joke about a stubborn contractor. And sitting in the place of honor at the head of the table was Great Aunt Martha, wrapped in a thick wool shawl, smiling softly. Before we sat down to eat, my mind briefly wandered back to the mailbox at the end of my dirt driveway. Yesterday, a piece of mail had arrived stamped with the seal of a federal correctional facility. It was a letter from my father, Gareth. He was currently serving a 15-year federal sentence for wire fraud, money laundering, and illegal gambling. His letter wasn't an apology. It was a desperate, pathetic plea asking me to deposit $500 into his prison commissary account so he could buy better snacks. I hadn't cried. I hadn't felt guilty. I just felt a cold, absolute emptiness. I had taken the cheap lined paper, walked over to my beautiful stone fireplace, and tossed it straight into the roaring flames. I watched the paper curl, turn black, and turn into completely harmless ash. That was my final boundary. I didn't owe him a single dollar, and I certainly didn't owe him my peace. As we all gathered around the heavy oak dining table, Martha gently tapped her glass with a silver spoon. The room went quiet. She reached into her expensive leather handbag and pulled out a thick, sealed legal envelope. "Peyton," Martha said, her raspy voice thick with deep, melting emotion, "when your grandmother passed away, she made me promise to protect you from Gareth's greed. She knew he would try to ruin you. I am so unbelievably proud of the strong, independent woman you have become. You didn't just survive the trap, you built a kingdom out of the ashes." She slid the heavy envelope across the table. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a legal bank statement. "I officially sold the Milford house last month," Martha explained, a satisfied spark in her eyes. The house Gareth and Deanna thought they would live in forever. It sold for exactly $850,000. I took every single penny of that sale and placed it into an ironclad trust fund. It is legally locked. It cannot be touched by anyone except your future children. Gareth's fake empire is now the foundation for your true legacy. Tears pricked my eyes, not out of pain but out of pure, overwhelming gratitude. I stood up, walked over to my great-aunt, and wrapped my arms around her. She squeezed me back, her frail hands holding me with the strength of 100 mothers. The poison was gone. The toxic illusion of the perfect Dixon family had been buried deep in the dirt, and a beautiful, authentic chosen family had grown in its place. After dinner, while Nova and Ray were washing dishes and laughing in the kitchen, I stepped out onto my front porch. I pulled my thick sweater tight against the freezing November wind. The snow was falling heavily now, coating the dark forest in a pure, clean blanket of white. I looked over at my front door. I had painted it a massive, bright, blindingly cheerful yellow. It was a symbol of light, a beacon of safety. I thought about my mother, still scrubbing greasy plates at that roadside diner. I thought about Brielle, bouncing from couch to couch, entirely stripped of her fake turquoise blue influencer lifestyle. They had chosen to steal, to lie, to sacrifice me for their own vanity. And in the end, they had lost everything. Taking care of family doesn't mean letting them drain your bank account. It doesn't mean staying silent when they forge your name or spend your hard-earned money to fuel their own fake lives. Setting a boundary is the most terrifying, painful thing you can do, but it is also the first step to truly saving yourself. I took a deep breath of the freezing, crisp air. My lungs felt completely clear. I didn't win a lottery. I didn't magically fix the people who broke me. But I got my life back. I got my money back. I got a career that I loved, a cabin that I owned, and a family that actually loved me. The dark woods were completely silent. No one was coming to threaten me. No one was demanding I pay for their mistakes. The storm was finally, permanently over. And as I turned the brass knob of my bright yellow door to walk back inside to the warmth of my real family, I smiled. If you felt the heavy, beating heart of this journey, if you understand the terrifying, breathless truth of what it takes to finally cut the ropes and build your own safe haven, then you know this wasn't just a story about stolen money. It was a story about the raw intensity of survival, absolute justice, and the deep emotional power of taking back your name. If these words resonated with the battles you've fought behind closed doors, hit that like button, not just for the story, but as a quiet nod to everyone out there who survived their own storms. And if you crave more deeply real, emotionally gripping narratives that don't shy away from the hard truths of life, hit subscribe and stay connected. You belong here with us. There is always life after the storm, and I'll be here waiting to share the next breathless chapter with you.